Hey everyone, welcome to Man Cave Insider. I'm Dennis Clark. Thank you for joining me. If you like what you see, make sure you subscribe to the channel down below so you can see past and future episodes. You could also follow the channel on Twitter. The handle is @InsiderCave. Now this is the 20th episode in this channel and I wanted to do something a little bit different. For the 10th episode, I did a list of the top 10 sequels of all time. Now I'm going to do a list of the top 10 threequels of all time. Now, what is a threequel? A threequel combines the words three and sequel, and it is the third film in a series of films. The list that I compiled is based on my own opinions, and I certainly would like to leave it open for debate. Now, when I did the sequel list, I found it very difficult to narrow it down to 10 because there are so many great second chapters in film series. But for every great second chapter, it's very difficult to have a great third chapter. So when I made this list up, it was a fairly short list, but nevertheless, I think I have a great list of movies. So let's get started. The number 10 top greatest threequel of all time is the movie Before Midnight, which came out in 2013. This is the third film in a series of films directed by Richard Linklater that started with Before Sunrise in 1995, Before Sunset in 2004. The first film was a story of an American male backpacking through Europe, and he meets a French woman named Celine on a train, and they spend the night in Vienna talking about their lives, about different things, and they fall in love in the process. At the very end of the movie, they make a promise to meet back there 6 months later. The sequel, Before Sunset, takes place 9 years later when the characters meet again for the first time, talking about what their lives have been up to and the impact that the events of the first film have had on their life. The third film, Before Midnight, finds them 9 years later together raising twin girls while on a vacation in Greece. The second and third films were written by Richard Linklater and stars Julie Delpy and Ethan Hawke, and both the second and third film got nominated for Best Screenplay Oscar. It's not a well-known trilogy compared to other ones, but nevertheless, it's gained a very big cult following over the years. Now, the films have come out every 9 years, so if they did make a fourth one, it would be slated to come out in 2022. However, neither Richard Linklater, Ethan Hawke, or Julie Delpy has commented about the status of a fourth film. Number 9 on the list is Thor Ragnarok, which came out in 2017. The second film in the series, Thor: The Dark World, was considered by many to be one of the weaker films in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So for the third one, they brought in New Zealand director Taika Waititi. They also brought in Tessa Thompson to play Valkyrie, Cate Blanchett to play Helena, Jeff Goldblum as the Grandmaster, and had Mark Ruffalo as the Incredible Hulk, and even a cameo by Benedict Cumberbatch as Doctor Strange. It had a great 80s techno score done by Mark Mothersbaugh of Devo, and it grossed over $800 million worldwide. It was so successful that Thor is going to be the first character in the Marvel series to get a fourth film with Thor: Love and Thunder that is slated to come out in 2022. Number 8 is Goldfinger, which came out in 1964 and was the third film in the James Bond series. It had a larger budget, bigger than the first two films combined, which were Dr. No and From Russia with Love. And it established a lot of things in Bond movies that have been seen ever since. First off, it had the pre-title sequence. It had the theme song. It introduced the gadgets and the infamous Aston Martin car, which has been a staple of all the Bond movies. Number 7 is Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. Now, when Steven Spielberg and George Lucas got together to create the character of Indiana Jones, Lucas made Spielberg promise that he was going to direct 3 movies. The second film, Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, had a much darker tone, so it was intentional that the third film was going to have a much lighter, much more fun tone, more in the vein of Raiders of the Lost Ark. They had a wonderful prologue that featured River Phoenix as a young Indiana Jones, and they brought in Sean Connery to play Indiana Jones' father. This was intended to be the end of the Indiana Jones films, and it ended literally with Indiana Jones riding off into the sunset. But they did revive the series almost 20 years later with Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, and there is talk of a fifth film within the next couple of years. Number 6 is Rocky III with Sylvester Stallone. The second film saw Rocky Balboa becoming the heavyweight champion of the world. The third film takes place several years later with Rocky defending the title for the 10th time and living a much more luxurious life than he had previously known. He suffered a humiliating defeat to Clubber Lang and then gets trained by former rival Apollo Creed for a rematch. This movie introduced the world to Mr. T, Hulk Hogan, and has one of the greatest movie theme songs of all time, Eye of the Tiger. Number 5 on the list is The Godfather Part 3, which came out in 1990. Now, this film has been the subject of a lot of unfair scrutiny over the years, simply because it is compared to Godfather 1 and 2. This came out 16 years later after Godfather 2, and was nominated for Best Picture, making the Godfather trilogy the first trilogy to have all 3 movies nominated for a Best Picture Academy Award. Number 4 is Toy Story 3, which came out in 2010. The first Toy Story came out in 1995 and was the first ever full-length computer-generated movie. A sequel followed 4 years later in 1992, but it would be another 11 years before Toy Story 3 came to theaters. Toy Story 3 was only the second animated film in history to be nominated for Best Picture after Beauty and the Beast. A fourth film followed in 2019. Number 3 on the list is Back to the Future Part 3, which came out in 1990. After the success of 1985's Back to the Future, director Bob Zemeckis and writer Bob Gale decided to make parts 2 and 3 back to back. The third film was a Western that saw Marty McFly going back to 1885 to save Doc Brown and bring him back to 1985. It's been 35 years since the original movie came out, yet Back to the Future remains one of the most beloved trilogies of all time and has recently been adapted into a Broadway musical debuting in London later this year. Number 2 on the list is Return of the Jedi, the third film in the original Star Wars trilogy. The second film, The Empire Strikes Back, had several monumental cliffhangers. Is Darth Vader Luke Skywalker's father? Will Han Solo be saved? Yoda said there was another hope. Who was that? And will the Empire finally be defeated? Return of the Jedi had the task of dealing with all of these and providing a satisfying ending to the trilogy, and it did so in spades. Recently, I saw all 9 Star Wars films as part of a marathon event a few months ago, and when I watched Return of the Jedi for the first time in several years, I fell in love with the movie all over again. There's so much great stuff in this film that 37 years later, it's still one of my favorite movies of all time. And the number 1 greatest threequel of all time is The Lord of the Rings, Return of the King, which came out in 2003. This was the 3rd chapter in the Lord of the Rings trilogy, and it accomplished several things. It was the 3rd film in the series to be nominated for Best Picture, which had only been done by the Godfather trilogy. It was nominated for and won 11 Academy Awards, which tied 1959's Ben-Hur and 1997's Titanic as the film with the most Academy Awards ever. It was the first science fiction fantasy movie to win Best Picture, and it was the first Part 3 in a series to win the Best Picture Academy Awards. That is why Return of the King is the greatest threequel of all time. Now I'm going to put some links down below where you can purchase some of these movies. And like I said in the beginning, this is my list that I composed. And I'd like to hear if there's anything that you feel should have been left on this list. I'd like to know what's your favorite threequels of all time. So feel free to leave that in the comments, subscribe to this channel, and we look forward to seeing you next time.